The Shining Knight Saga. Prologue. The light from the burning planet below cast crazed flickering shadows through the thick armored glass of the viewing port, the death of a world lighting a dark imposing figure and casting their silhouette upon the underlings behind them. With a savage grin at the haunting sight, the figure turned and with slow measured steps traced their path back the raised walkway to their command throne. The soft murmur of the command staff in the sunken workstations to either side subsided as they strode forth. As they slowly lowered themselves into its comforting embrace with a small sigh, a wretched creature scuttled up to the foot of the throne and bowed on shaking legs, not daring to utter so much as a whimper out of fear of the figure before them. "Rise and bear thy news, I am curious to know of our success." The figure bade the quivering creature before them in a commanding tone. With a small voice near paralyzed with fear, the messenger spoke, "SS Supreme One, I." The enthroned figure waved their hand for silence, which was immediately granted as the messenger's quivering mandibles snapped closed. Leaning forward slightly and casting their piercing gaze upon the wretch, they smiled cruelly. "Your voice betrays your fear, and fear is a weakness. I give you but one chance to prove your resolve. Pray to your pitiful gods that they may grant you peace, for I shall not." With this statement they leaned back into the throne, resting their chin on one of their heavy armored gauntlets. With a perceivable effort, the skittering creature straightened itself with a lurch and took a moment to compose its shaking legs before starting again in a clearer voice. "Supreme Leader, I bring the news from our spinward front. The burning of the 1,000 celestial stars has been successful, as has the scouring of the Grianth Empire. Minimal losses have afforded the opportunity to push past the defensive line of the Great Ones and hit their supply systems almost unguarded. My Supreme Leader, they are retreating." With this last declaration of savagery, he stepped back a pace, waiting for his master's edict. Silent for a moment, the figure hummed to themselves, deep in thought. After a slight pause, they straightened. "It's a trap. Disengage the 42nd Fleet and have them move to support the forward push. We must not let the objective fall into their hands. Now is not the time to push after cowardly scum. We must make all haste for the core if we are to cleanse the weak from this plane." As the creature bowed and skittered away to do its master's bidding, the dark figure sat motionless on their throne of adamant. "I am close," they thought to themselves. "Finally, after all this time, my plan will come to bear the sweetest of fruit." Allowing themselves the luxury of a genuine chuckle, they stood once more. Walking with powerful strides to an adjoining room full of screens and data feeds, they leaned over a protruding balcony, looking over the sea of busy workers attached to their stations with iron chains. As the workers noticed their dark lord looking over them, a decided hush quickly swept through the massive room. Again the figure chuckled. "Yes, this is true power," they thought. Not that pointless drivel the so-called Great Ones wielded, but true unmitigated control. With this kind of fear they had conquered stars and burned empires to molten slag and ashen rubble. True fear that demanded, no, commanded absolute loyalty. With but a gesture these pitiful whelps would fall upon themselves to appease their dark master, and the strong would prevail over the weak, for that is all that truly mattered when it came to the end of all things, to have the strength to do what was necessary for the survival of the universe. A shudder that rocked the plates under their feet jolted them from their thoughts. Looking quickly to the nearest worker, he demanded, "You report." Swaying side to side in confusion, the pitiful thing cried, "My Supreme Leader, I know not what has befallen us." With a roar of rage, the Supreme Leader picked up the terrified crewmen and effortlessly tore them in two with a heave of their massive shoulders. Tossing the broken remains to the side with not even a glance, they stepped menacingly towards the next station. "Wait, my lord, I believe I know the cause of the disruption." Cringing upon itself in abject horror, the crewmen screwed their many eyes shut and waited for death, but after several moments of this they blearily opened 5 of their forward eyes. Seeing the figure of their lord standing over them glaring, they jerked back but were stopped by the shackles that had them bound to their station. Standing over the cringing crewmember, the Supreme Leader spoke, in a tone that left no questions as to the price of failure. "I have spared you for your seeming competency. I await your answer. Do not disappoint me." Speaking quickly so as to not lose their nerve, the crewman replied, "It appears as though multiple Yuchuan planetoid-class assault moons have jumped into close proximity to the planet. It seems that the destruction of the planet has left them no fear of jumping this deep into the star's gravity. There are no more inhabited worlds in this system to be affected by the resulting coronal mass ejections from this system star in response to the gravity pulses. Continuing on after a brief pause to glance at the swarming data on their screen, they continued in a quieter tone. My lord, I fear that in our current state we are underpowered to deal with a threat of this magnitude. What is your command? Silence reigned on the deck except for the pinging of messages being received on some of the terminals. With a sour grunt, the Supreme Leader thought hard. While their flagship, the Ruinstorm, was more than capable of dealing with one or even two of the vast world ships, there sat on the Auspex monitor a total of 17 of the massive ships. It would seem that the collapse of the Great One's front line was indeed a deception to shift resources towards this last-ditch effort to cut the head from the Voidfiend, as it were. Pondering the best plan of action, they swiftly turned and marched back to their adamant throne, the cool impervious substance serving to focus their mind. Grinning like a revenue as they turned toward their most trusted generals and command staff who awaited as always to their right hand. Call forward the breaker ships, command them to ram the 3 leftmost planetoids at maximum drive coefficient. Inform them that the Devourer of Light will see their souls in the great beyond and that their sacrifice will bring about the great cleansing. Next, command the neutron bombardiers to focus their full firepower on the lead ship. Once its shields are down, they are to continue to the next closest one and repeat. I want the macro cannons of the Screaming Doom to open fire as soon as that ship's shields collapse. Tell the escort frigates to fire their kilonova cannons at the rearmost ships. That should slow them down enough for the bombard flotilla to collapse their shields. Seeing the command staff begin to relay their orders, they settled back into their throne, confident that this puny reprisal would be dealt with at a minimal cost to their own strength. Supreme Leader, 8 more ships just jumped in behind us, range 6,000 segments. One of the staff yelled in alarm. Jerking forwards in their throne, their eyes opened wide in the first genuine surprise they had felt in a long time. Shaking off the feeling quickly, they demanded the composition, to which a different staff member replied, "Unknown ship designations, my lord, unable to find a match in any known records." With a gasp of fear, they continued, "My lord, the new contacts, they are impossible, that is impossible." With a shriek of panic, they fled the command deck as chaos broke out. "Nothing is impossible. I command you to be still." The Supreme Leader roared, and to the credit of the remaining commanders they quieted, though not as quickly as would have been normal. Once they had stilled, the figure stood from their throne and walked to the frightened generals. When they got but 2 paces from them, they asked with a sense of deadly calm, "What is impossible about these ships?" One of the oldest spoke out feebly with a calm resignation that befits one who knows that death is inevitable. With a sigh they stated simply, "My lord, honor to serve thee in life. On my oath and the souls of my kin I declare that they are cosmic destroyers." A look of shock crossed the face of the Supreme Leader. "No, it can't be. They were destroyed. I destroyed them." Throwing one of the staff aside, they stepped forwards and pulled up the reading themselves, but there could be no doubt, the ship's sensors did not lie. Truth can be a harsh thing. It cares not for the feelings of mortals and laughs at the desires of gods, and this truth caused the dark figure to lower their head in resignation. The destruction of a single cosmic destroyer would cost the vast majority of his fleet, but 8 was impossible. With heavy steps they slumped back down onto their throne. "Open communications. Offer unconditional surrender," he stated with a pained tone. "My lord," one of the younger and more hot-headed ones began, "we cannot surrender to these filth. We shall wipe them from this plane like all others." A waved hand from the Supreme Leader stopped them. "Observe their actions if you would. What are they doing at this time?" "My lord, they are simply sitting there. They are doing nothing." "Exactly," the leader said. "Nothing. They know that we cannot win, and they are laughing, daring us to even try. But to fire would be our doom. It is better to live in chains than to let our most righteous cause be snuffed out like a candle. There will be no further considerations. Transmit our surrender." As the single message was relayed across the void of space, the universe itself seemed to heave a sigh of relief. The massive ships of the Great Ones and the devilish shapes of the destroyers moved to converge on the Ruinstorm. Drawing closer, they surrounded the massive vessel on all sides as countless smaller parasite vessels sprang from cavernous openings in the bellies and flanks of the destroyers. The crew of the Ruinstorm were quickly subdued, and any who resisted were erased. As the hooded and shadowed figures glided onto the bridge, the Supreme Leader stood tall, shoulders straight and back stiff. If it was their time, they would not die cowering in their chair like a coddled youth. They would die with fire in their eyes and curses on their lips. But before they could utter a single word, the lead shadow spoke, as much as a seemingly non-corporeal creature could be said to speak. Matthias of Feistrom, eldest of Brenton, you have committed the gravest of atrocities that one can commit. The uncountable dead clamor for your soul, but they shall not have it. Not for you the martyr's death. Drifting slowly closer with each word, the swirling form stopped just short of the Supreme Leader. Swallowing in genuine fear, the Supreme Leader croaked, "How do you know that name?" "No one knows that name." In a slightly sing-song voice the shadow hissed, "We know many things, things that were, things that are, and things that will come to be." Drawing into itself slightly, the shifting mass seemed to gain a semblance of form, slowly coalescing into lithe serpentine figure. "Your sins have garnered great sorrow, but none shall suffer greater sorrow than you. We give unto you the curse of life eternal. Death shall not touch you, and as all that you know slowly fades to dust and dead light, you shall remain unceasing, undying, forever to know all that could have been but shall never be, and powerless to change it." With this last statement, the serpentine figure lashed forwards towards Matthias, and their consciousness ceased. Darkness greeted their senses, cold and unyielding. They tried to move but found they could not, all directions and motions blocked by some dark force. Slowly, pinpricks of truth seemed to manifest, trickling into their tattered mind. Scattered light resolves itself as awareness rushes back. Stars in their trillions shone in their vision. They were in deep space, outside the reach of anything tangible. Struggling to gain some semblance of control, Matthias roared in fury as their efforts were in vain. Glaring acidly at the lights they had sworn to destroy, they drifted, endlessly floating in that deep abyss between stars. End of transmission.